faith. Don't miss the opportunity. I would like to explain death to you. You say, well, what do you know about death? Have you died? No. You know, you don't need to die to know about death. I'm sure a lot of you understand what I just said. Some of you don't. I sometimes, as a meditation, imagine myself on my deathbed. I don't put too many frills around it. And I imagine suddenly I feel my soul leaving my body. I would imagine at that point, knowing myself as I do, that the first thing I'm going to think of is, boy, I died. I mean, this is it. But I don't think you're dead very long when suddenly the most glorious moment of your life begins. The whole purpose of life, the whole purpose of God bringing you out of nothingness into this world, the whole purpose of your transforming journey comes to you face to face. You see God. You hear His voice. You see His eyes. And immediately I think your whole life will pass before you. Good, bad, indifferent. And you will look at Him wondering. I think the most important thing that will happen is that you will want so much to run into His arms. You will want so much to run towards Him. You say, well, why can't I? Did I ever tell you one time about the time I was making negatives? You know what negatives are? It's, you make those negatives for printing. If some of you heard it, but I won't hurt you to hear it again. And I had made 2 negatives of the same layout. I couldn't find them. And I looked everywhere in the dark room. The little red lights were on, but I just couldn't find them. And finally I leaned over the sink, and I went like this, and my hand moved something. And I realized that there it was, but they were so close together. They had been kind of glued together by the water, or the acid. And the Lord said to me, Angelica, do you see those negatives? And I said, yes, Lord. He said, put them together. So I put them together. They were perfect. And you know, I couldn't see the least bit of difference. It looked like one negative. It was fascinating. I knew there were 2, but there was only one. And then he said, that's heaven. When you see me face to face, and the image, my image in you is perfect at your death, you and I will be one. And there was no difference. And then he said to me, move the negative a little. And so I took the 2 negatives and I went like this. And it was blurred. Very blurred. And there was a distortion there. And he said, that's an image of purgatory. And I realized exactly what he was trying to say. He was trying to say that if I were to see God, and yet I knew I was so imperfect, I knew I had said no to him so many, many times. The desire to be with him would be so great because of his beauty, his love, his compassion, that power to draw me, and I couldn't go. I mean, it would be like your feet stuck in mud or glue, and you want to go, and you can't. That's purgatory. And then he said, separate them. And I did. And I knew one stood alone, and the other stood alone. And I realized what he was saying there. He was saying to me, that's hell. When a soul looks at me at death and says, I don't love you, and they turn away. You see, death is not so much a judgment as light. And you and I as Christians have been given, and especially those of you that are Catholic and have the Eucharist and all those marvelous sacraments and Mary, you must speak of the kingdom that is to come with great enthusiasm and great wonder. Because you see, the kingdom of heaven is up and down. It is within, it is around you, and it is above you. It is within you, it is around you, and it is above you. There are not three heavens. There's only one. I want you to turn to John 14:21. And the Lord says, anyone who keeps my commandments will be one with me. He will be one who loves me, and anyone who loves me will be loved by my Father. And I shall love him and show myself to him. To see the face of God is worth all the pain, all the heartache. You know, if you look at John, the first epistle of St. John, and you look at the 16th verse of that epistle, you'll find in the first epistle of John, 4:16, or 4:6, I guess, or 16, he said that we ourselves have known and put our faith in God's love towards us. God is love. And anyone who lives in love lives in God. And God lives in him. You see, that's why heaven, it's so important to think of heaven, because I begin my heaven, my purgatory, or my hell right here. Right here. You just don't plop from one state to another. This is very clear. And so that's why it's so important, so very important, that so many today who think of committing suicide and taking their lives because life is too hard or the pain is too great. You see what you run the danger of losing. And you see, one other reason why heaven is a little bit hard for us to understand is because in heaven, you will be loved by everyone. Isn't that exciting? Everyone. And total unselfishness. Can you imagine even being in a place today, in a family today, where every member really and truly loves each other? If you do, then you live in heaven here. Today we talk an awful lot about love. I wonder, though, how much we really love. Would the world be in the condition it's in, do you think? If we all loved everyone? Just think for a moment now, if the world loved everybody, if we all loved everybody, on a human level, divine level, in today's world, you wouldn't have all the terrorism, you wouldn't have prejudice, you wouldn't have selfishness, you wouldn't have robberies and murders. You wouldn't be afraid to walk out in the streets. You wouldn't be afraid. There would be no lying and cheating, no adultery, no lust. You see, that's impossible. No, it's not impossible. Why? Because he did this for you. And he did this for me. You and I make it impossible. He made it possible. I want you to think about that, huh? I want you to think about that a minute before we go for a little break. I want you to think in this few minutes or a minute, I want you to think, who do I love? And who don't I love? And why?